Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of the Men of Steel podcast where we talk about Superman and Superman adjacent topics. If you enjoy this clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your shows. So that was it for that era. And that's because like there are a lot of characters in the Captain Marvel pantheon that can fight Captain Marvel. So like Black Adam wasn't particularly, he was not particularly special, and he actually was the least visually distinct of them all. Because there are the biggest one actually back in the day is a character named Ibak, who had the same basic deal. It was like Ivan the Terrible. I forget the whole breakdown. Attila the Hun. It's also an acronym situation, but he could fight Captain Marvel pretty regularly. Savannah's son actually was able to fight Captain Marvel, but that was more back when Captain Marvel wasn't really established as powerful as he would become in the course of it. And then there was Sabak, who was a demon-themed version of the same concept of like say the word and then take the powers. And that character, so it was like Satan, Azazel, Beelzebub, like that whole situation right there. That character actually was not a Captain Marvel villain so much as a Captain Marvel Jr. villain. And because Captain Marvel Jr. was also fiercely popular.
I didn't know there was a junior. Wow.
Yeah. So it's Freddy. It's the one on the crutches in the first movie.
Gotcha.
Oh.
So they call him Junior?
Yeah, so he was Captain Marvel Jr., but his special word to transform was Captain Marvel, because he drew his powers from Captain Marvel, not from Shazam.
Oh my goodness.
And so every time he said his actual name, he would transform. And it was like a joke. It would be like, hey, what was your name again? You can call me Junior.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and that was kind of a fun device there. Captain Marvel Jr. Was Elvis Presley's most favorite superhero, and that's why all of his costumes later in life had that Captain Marvel design to it, because he was obsessed with Captain Marvel Jr.
Interesting.
Fun little tweak there. Anyway, Captain Marvel Jr. had his own book. He had plenty of stories by himself, and generally they were more adult themed, ironically. And so Sabak was his rival character. Because they could get away with a little bit more demonic imagery and whatnot in that book, whereas the main Captain Marvel book was a bit more cartoony. So, it's weird which book is which, but I mean they're both they're both child/early teen characters who transform into superheroes. Just one turns into an adult superhero. But yeah, so lots of villains back in the day, and also comics weren't quite as driven by big fights, although there are some. There's actually a really cool Captain Marvel fight with a character who looks a lot like Black Adam called Mr. Z, and that issue was drawn by Jack Kirby, and it's just a throwdown fight, where they're ripping through buildings and whatnot. It's really cool, and like I said, he looks just like Black Adam, but he has a mustache and a Z instead of a lightning bolt on his chest.
The evil,
and then it turns out he's a robot, but
evil twirling mustache.
Well,
And then,
Why oughta?
yeah, but I mean, it was the style at the time. But it turned out that was a robot, and it was a one-off, because Jack Kirby did some Captain Marvel stuff, but he wasn't the main artist on the book ever. But it shows the evolution of where comics would eventually go to. Anyway, so cut to DC sues Fawcett Comics because Captain Marvel supposedly is too much like Superman, even though at the time Captain Marvel first appeared, Superman could not fly. So in terms of their powers, there was a big discrepancy there. But that whole thing kind of shifted around, and courts dismissed it, and then certain courts would accept it when they appealed, and then Fawcett would appeal and countersue. There was a whole thing, and it went on for years. And eventually, even though there are multiple rulings that came down on DC's side, the big reason why the comic company folded was just because at this point comics as a whole had started to fade in terms of popularity, and this had been very costly. So regardless of the actual rulings involved of can you use this character or whatnot, it was just this is just cut our losses. We don't want to deal with this industry anymore. It is too expensive. Everything's too annoying. A lot of books were moving away from superhero comics at this point. It was just the time. It's the end of the golden age, and then you have this little gap of time where there's only a few superhero comics being published, and instead it's mostly funny animals and romance comics and horror comics. And weirdly, during this period, Hoppy the Marvel Bunny continues being published because he's a funny animal book, and it's the rights are bought out, and that's why there's a different costume design for him for a while there. And, over in Great Britain, where superhero comics didn't really die out, that's where Marvel Man comes in, where they take the Captain Marvel concept and then they just rewrite his origin to be science instead of magic, but it's the same kid turns into an adult superhero thing. And their version of Black Adam was Nasty Man.
Nasty Man? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Why? The name.
Yeah, and his sidekick, Kid Nasty Man.
Kid Nasty? What?
Yeah.
That sounds like a rapper from today, actually.
Oh my. Wow.
Remember, if you like the clip, after you're done liking and subscribing, check out certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of the show, as well as a ton of other great shows.